My daughter has low immune system. That is why she always falls sick and will unable to concentrate during class. I am worried that she will not be able to catch up. I think she needs this. This is Chewies Immunologist, an immunity booster that is rich in Wellmune. It can also effectively enhance immunity and helps in recovery.
This is not enough. She needs this too. Chewies IQ. It contains 100% plum-based algae DHA, which boosts intelligence and helps to improve eyesight.
Mommy, what is this? This is so yummy.
If you like it, I will give it to you every day. There are many different flavors.
After taking this, you will never easily catch cold and fall sick anymore.
Chewies focus on nutrition and healthy growth.
Hello everyone, thank you for joining today's live session. My name is Nadia Nazir and I will be your host for today. I hope you're doing well and most importantly that you have gotten yourself vaccinated. If not, what are you waiting for? Maybe you're waiting for your turn, but at least you've already signed up. So make that first step and keep yourselves safe. Now, today we're going to be talking about child's brain and eye development and health. And from this discussion today, I hope that there will be an increase in awareness among adults about why the health and development of children's brains and eyes are important. Now, also to parents out there, if you're watching right now, you might have questions about the health of your child's brain and eyes, and I hope some of the questions will be answered today because we will be discussing with two people who have in-depth information about these questions of yours. To help us with the first one, I would like to bring upon Dr. Wong who is a professor of pediatrics, consultant pediatrician, and child neurologist. Hi, Dr. Wong.
Hi, everybody.
Okay, just wondering, where are you attached to right now, Dr. Wong?
Hi, I'm GPL. Have a good day so far. I hope all of you. Yes, I'm actually a clinician, a teacher, and a researcher all into one. As a clinician, I see children in the hospital who children are not well and try to actually cure them of their illness. And as a teacher, I teach medical students, hopefully to train them to be a good doctor. And as a researcher, I do a lot of research into medicine for the future.
All right, fantastic. And alongside Dr. Wong, as I mentioned, we have two people today. Please say hello to Ms. Foong Pui Hing, who is a principal dietitian. Hi,
hello, everyone. Yeah.
Okay, how about you, Ms. Foong? Where are you attached to now?
I'm actually a dietitian at the Institute Jantung Negara. We provide medical nutrition therapy for both adults and children. So for children, we actually look into children who have congenital heart diseases who actually come into IJN for their surgeries and procedures.
All right. Okay, so before we start today's session, happy news for viewers because today we have a giveaway of exclusive Chewies products and it's so easy to participate. Okay, 3 steps. Number 1, all you have to do is follow these 3 steps. Like this Facebook live video, this one that you're watching right now, share this Facebook live video and make sure that your post is on public because if it's on private, nobody can see it apart from your own friends. And then number 3, comment, I want Chewies IQ in the comment section and tag 2 of your friends. It's that easy. Okay, so now we're going to go back to the session. Let's start with our first question, which goes to Dr. Wong. Dr. Wong, we're going to start with the basics. Number 1, what types of disorders do pediatric neurologists treat and diagnose?
Right, good questions. I think as a pediatric neurologist, we normally see conditions and treat conditions associated with either the brain, the nerve, or the muscle. In a simplistic view, the brain, we call it the central nervous system. The nerve is the peripheral nerve. That means the nerve that coming out from the brain connecting to the various part of the body. And also the muscle. And muscle could be either the problems due to the nerve issue that no signal is passing to the nerve, or that's actually a problems at the junction. We call it neuromuscular junction problems, or actually disease with the muscle. And due to actually autoimmune disease or due to vessel issue, metabolic disorder, genetic disorder, idiopathic, or some of them can be just the child was born with some congenital disorder. So these are various type of things that a pediatric neurologist normally deal with.
I can't even begin to imagine the kind of stress that parents have to go through when their children have one of the symptoms that you mentioned above. But what are some commonly found neurological disorders in children?
Well, I think, yes, I think even though it sounds problematic or it sounds frightening, I think fortunately in children, I think not many of them have these problems. And even with that, I think I see the common one. Some of them are actually treatable, and some of them I can reduce the sort of severity. For example, the three conditions that I normally see are epilepsies, developmental issue, and behavioral disorder. What I mean by epilepsy, for some of you who are not familiar, epilepsy is recurrent fit, and the child suddenly had jerking of the hand, eyes roll up, and then frothing of the mouth, lose their consciousness. So that is actually fits, and if it's recurrent, then it becomes epilepsy. And the developmental issue that I refer to are actually anything dealing with the development of the brain. For example, if it's a congenital one, we are looking at, say, malformation of the brain. And some of them, we do not know exactly what caused, but children come out with developmental delay, learning disorder like dyslexia, where the children have difficulty reading written text. So that is actually a developmental disorder. And finally, the behavioral disorder. What I mean by behavioral disorder is actually some children exhibit some behavior that are deviated from the normal norms. For example, autism is the one that we heard a lot. Attention deficit hyperactive disorder or attention deficit disorder. So these are the behavioral issues that we see. So coming back to what I say, epilepsy, we can treat in most of them, and 3/4 of them we eventually grow out of it. And developmental disorder and behavior, we can actually modify and lessen the severity. Back to you, Nadia.
Thank you, Doctor. Okay, the next question goes out to Ms. Foong. So I want to ask you about how diet actually plays a role in early brain development and health, because we always hear about if you eat well, there are a lot of things that can be treated, but you think, how's that even possible? It's just food. So the first question I want to ask you is, what are the roles of nutrition in brain development, Ms. Wong?
Well, brain development actually goes hand in hand with the overall child's growth, yeah? So we cannot separate both, actually. So what is important is starting from the child in the womb during the pregnancy stage. The maternal nutrition is very important. So the mother must get enough energy, protein, fats, and micronutrients such as iron, folic acid, B12, DHA, zinc, and so on and so forth. Because by having all this, then the child will grow normally, yeah, adequate growth. So specifically for brain development, the nutrients which are of concern would be things like folic acid and B12. It has been shown that maternal deficiency in folic acid and B12 is associated with neural tube defects like spina bifida. So hence, during the pregnancy and throughout the pregnancy, mothers are actually encouraged to take foods which are adequate in these nutrients. Or even if that's not adequate, then supplementation is necessary for them. Yeah. And for example, for in terms of DHA, which is many people know about it, yeah, it helps in building the brain cells and also the structural membranes of the brain cells, yeah, and the neurotransmission. So from the maternal stage, the baby in the womb, right up to the childhood stage, the child has to get enough of this from the mother's nutrition, the breast milk, and when after birth, maybe if the breast milk is not enough, formula milk may be needed. And then at the weaning stage, where the child 6 months above are introduced to semi-solid food. So all these nutrients must be in their diet to ensure adequate growth and overall brain health development.
Okay, I know this sounds silly, but I've come across some pregnant friends of mine who go like, I want to go on a diet. You can't go on a diet while you're pregnant, right?
Well, they have to define what exactly their diet means. Yeah. So if their diet consists of balanced nutrition without taking out specific major food groups totally, then it should be okay. Because yeah, so they need to define what diet they are talking about. If they're talking about weight loss during pregnancy, no, that's not the time.
Okay, the next question is Foong. Are there certain foods that influence children's brain health?
Yeah, like I've mentioned earlier, the children must get enough energy for their growth, protein, fats, and also micronutrients. Yeah, because there are some children may not get balance of this, then they may have stunted growth, undernutrition. Hence, that would actually impair their brain development overall. So, for example, specific nutrients for the brains, like say DHA, yeah, the long-chain fatty acids, are mainly found in marine foods like fish, yeah, and other seafood, and even algae. So, if the child is very picky in their food or adhering to a strict vegetarian diet and may not get enough of this, then they might need to think about how to balance it in their meals, and also possibly supplementation, because it's not adequately found in their meals.
And that there's some children who go like, oh, there's greens in my food, I don't want to eat that, or there's any color apart from what they like, and they just feel like that's icky and they don't want to touch it, right?
Yeah, I understand. So, but that's why the parents play a very important role in introducing foods for the children right from the weaning stage, 6 months and above. So the parents need to, explain to the child, feed the child with all these nutritious food, fruits, vegetables at the early stage, so that they'll get used to it, and then they will know the value.
Noted. Okay, we're going back to Dr. Wong. What is a critical period in brain development? Is it under the age of 5, which is the only critical period for brain development?
Right. I think it's quite important for us to understand that brain development is a continuum. From the time during conception to almost until adulthood, and we are looking at until about 25 years, and somebody stretch it up to 30 years. So it's a continuum. I think so. It's and every period there's actually a critical period for certain development, because brain development actually includes 3 critical components. One actually is a structural development. Second one is an intellectual development, and third one actually is a behavioral development. So perhaps I think when we talk about structural, intellectual, and behavior, that we can perhaps say that in the early years, I think the first 5 years, structural development is crucial. Then subsequently during the school-going age, intellectual development is important. And then in the adolescent and early adulthood, behavioral development is the crucial period for this development.
Okay, as you mentioned, they're all crucial, but why are the early years of a child's life most critical for brain development?
Right. I think the reason why the early years is important is because of the way our brain works. I think when we were born, we actually were born with more brain cells at birth. I think, and the brain cells actually are not connected. They are scattered and they're not connected. And that actually reflects in a very limited function. So if you see a newborn baby, I think all the baby does is sleep, wake up, feed, and cry. Nothing else, nothing much, I think. But with times, these cells actually network together. And when they network together, when the impulse start flowing in a logical way, in a meaningful way, then we begin to see a lot of appearance of meaningful and purposeful actions. So that's the reason why I see, for example, at birth, at the time the children does nothing, the baby does nothing but sleeping, eating, and maybe crying. But then within 3 months, you begin to see the child start smiling and start reacting to the surrounding, and then 6 months start reaching out for things, and then by 1 year start walking, and then speech coming on and start interacting with the children, with the surrounding and with the parents. And so these are all the actually reflection of the connection that's coming together and more meaningful. I think I can draw analogy to a building. So I think a wiring in the building, for example, I think when the building actually, when we first built the building, the wiring are all over the place, a lot of wire, but they're not connected. So as we built the building, as we actually refined it, then we start connecting all the wire together, and that's where we start getting the switches in the places, and then you get the light. So that's how the brain works. Initially, a lot of things, but not working, and then later, as they network properly, and then they start working in a meaningful way.
That makes perfect sense. And when you put it out in layman's terms like that, it's like, all right, makes perfect sense. Okay, so the next question, we're going back to Ms. Foong. What are some misconceptions about childhood nutrition and health? Because, you know, online, you can read anything on YouTube. Everybody's a doctor or a dietitian these days.
Yes. Okay. One of the misconception about childhood nutrition and health is the perception of parents that the more expensive the food is, it's more nutrition in it. So it's not necessarily true. For example, some parents might purposely buy a lot of imported fruits like berries and say that, oh, it's really high in antioxidants, yeah? But not knowing that actually our local fruits like papaya, guava, all these are readily available at just a fraction of the cost, yet still deliver the adequate, necessary vitamins and antioxidants needed, yeah? So what is important is the parents need to understand the nutrition value of foods and how to make this eating habits sustainable, yeah, in the long run, yeah. Number two, lately also they have a lot of restrictive dietary patterns like being vegetarian, or the very strict ones that we call it vegans, where no animal products are consumed. So we need to be really careful with this and closely monitor, especially if it's for a young child less than 5 years old, because some of these restrictive dietary patterns may not provide adequate protein and some of the micronutrients like iron, B12, which are mostly found in animal products. Yeah. And number three is the lack of supervision in what the child actually eats. Nowadays, both parents are so busy working. Now, even though they are at home, working from home, they'll be so busy in meetings that they do not really supervise what the child really eats. And by allowing the child to eat whatever they want, they might eat a lot of food, but might have little nutrition content in there. So, for example, eating a lot of fried foods, sugar-sweetened beverages. So, excessive energy intake in the child with lacking of nutrients may lead to overweight and obesity, which is also another form of malnutrition in the long run and causes all kinds of chronic diseases.
I think a lot of parents, like you said, are busy, and working from home is actually more busy than actually going to the office because you're doing 3 or 4 things at the same time. And they like to feed their children chicken nuggets. Is that a bad thing necessarily?
Well, I mean, if you talk about commercial chicken nuggets, it's not 100% protein in there. It's not 100% meat. It's always mixed with other things like flour and other preservatives. If you're talking about homemade chicken nuggets, it's a different story because you will actually put the real meat in there with no preservatives, and maybe you can even add some vegetables hidden in there for the child to eat, especially if it's a picky eater. So as a dietitian, I actually educate the caregivers or the parents how to prepare simple meals at home for their children, which are nutritious.
So the next question goes to Dr. Wong. What are factors that can influence the brain's development?
Right, I think I will sort of if you want to ask me to categorize, I would say intrinsic and extrinsic. Intrinsic are the factor that a child is born that we cannot do anything about. I think a very good example would be genetics. So genetic essentially means to say the condition that actually sort of determine how we are. all right? And so we are born with a set of genetics that we cannot alter at all, right? And some of them actually can be intrinsic factor due to pregnancy or maternal condition. Again, then we cannot affect. For example, if the parents and mom has some condition that actually affects the pregnancy, and that's something we cannot change, or if there's any disease that affects the pregnancy, we can't change. So that is actually the intrinsic factor that can actually determine the brain development in utero or during pregnancy. But the extrinsic factor are the one that actually come to play when the child is born. I think, and there are a few quite important ones. There are lots, in fact, I think that we cannot actually finish discussing them. But in a very simplistic view, I think in a simplistic way, we can look at, for example, nutrition. That's a very important extrinsic factor. We know that children, if they don't get enough nutrition, especially in the early stages, that will affect the growth, either physical or the mental growth. I think that's quite important. And certain nutrition is more important than others. For example, certain vitamins, if it's lack in it, or certain protein is lack in it, you actually affects the brain's development. So I think that's quite important, because as I mentioned early on, networking and so on is just not networking, because networking needs actually the what I call nutrition to help the whole process to go. Right. And so I think if we have poor nutrition, it's almost like a house that have poor foundations. So if you don't lay the foundation properly in the house, and you affect the future sort of building of the house. Right. So that's one thing. The second thing actually is stimulations. I think that's quite important. A lot of people do not realize how important is the stimulation. So in stimulation here, I'm talking about intellectual and social stimulation. Because you remember that as a child learn to develop as the brain network, so they begin to actually have more purposeful interaction. But if the surrounding do not provide that kind of likewise reciprocal feedback, the child will not develop. I think, and you can see that. So, for example, children who grow up in an orphanage, right? They actually will have less what they call development overall compared to a child that's actually born in a good, loving family, because of the lack of stimulations. It's not that they are not good, but it's just that there's no stimulation. Similarly, I think we know that actually how if you put people in isolation, for example, in jail, I think that affects their development as well. So I think stimulation is extremely important, right? But the most important thing that I will look at actually is the environment, the support and the nurturing that we have. Because I think that if you do not provide a good stimulating environment, you lead to a deviant development. For example, if you are always negative about children, then actually the children will perceive that that's how the world works. So the brain development will then actually cue towards a negative development, and that's quite important. So if you do not give them enough sensory and motor development, and a child perhaps may look a little bit more clumsy because they don't exercise, they don't run, they don't feel, they don't touch and see. I think if you don't talk to them properly, then they don't actually sort of able to learn to communicate and so on. I think, and if you do not give a child a good relationship, that means a parent-child relationship, and you don't expose the child to a peer-to-peer relationship, then the child will have difficulty communicating with the surrounding. So I think, in fact, I think the last one is perhaps the most important of the various factors that affects the brain development.
All right. Okay, is mostly things that we actually know, but we take for granted because we think that, you know, a child is a human being, they'll just learn and, you know, just feed them food and they'll be full, they'll be happy. This is very informative.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, before we go to the next question, I just want to remind you, the viewer, one more time that you stand a chance to win Chewies products, okay, exclusive Chewies products. And all you have to do is just follow these 3 steps. Number 1, like this Facebook Live video right now, and then share this Facebook Live video and make sure your post is on public. It's not on private because otherwise no one will be able to see it apart from your own friends and family. And then leave a comment, I want Chewies IQ, in the comment section, and don't forget to tag 2 of your friends. That's it. That's simple. Now we're going back to the discussion. The next question, Ms. Foong, what could be the long-term consequences of undernutrition in early life?
Right. Undernutrition can be categorized in a few ways. It can mean wasting, that means low weight for height, stunting, low height for age, and underweight, low weight for age. So all this can be assessed using growth charts for the children according to their age and their gender. Now, the long-term consequences is when you say undernutrition, you see, when they don't get enough of one of the major things would be protein and iron, you see, they will not achieve normal growth. Yeah. So what happens is when they don't get enough of these nutrients, they don't have proper growth, that would actually put them into a very difficult situation. They'll be frequently ill, having infections, you know. So because of all these multiple medical conditions, then the child is being easily fussy, irritable, feel withdrawn because they have to isolate themselves from the other children or their family members. So that it actually affects their overall activity, and then also their IQ levels or maybe cognitive function maybe also be affected because they are frequently ill due to undernutrition. Yeah. So this is one thing that we have to address at the early life. The children must get adequate protein, micronutrients, and so on and so forth in a balanced way. On the other side is if the child is overweight and obesity, there is a high risk for them to actually get non-communicable diseases like diabetes, hypertension, and even heart disease. Yeah. So this is also another form of poor nutrition. According to WHO, apparently 45% of the deaths among children who are less than 5 years old are linked to undernutrition. That's quite a lot, yeah. And this mostly occur in the low and middle income countries. But at the same time, these countries also have the same problem of overweight and obesity. So they consume a lot of calories, but actually there's very little nutritional value to their food. So all this will actually affect the child in the long term. Yeah.
Okay, how do you think, like, I know even in adults, it is really hard to develop good eating habits, but how do you do it with children?
Yeah, actually for children, they would follow what the adults do. So parents and caregivers need to be role models, good role models for the children. For example, if the adult doesn't even eat vegetables and fruits, how would the child know that this is good for them? How would the child learn? Yeah. So, and also it's very important for the parents to introduce variety of food, fresh food, right from a young age. Involve them in the food preparation and teach them the nutrition value and what it means to have a balanced diet. And very important that they need to monitor the eating habits of their child.
All right. So it's all about encouragement and teaching via example, right? Setting a good example.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, so Dr. Wong, I have a statement here that says, brain development is a genetic thing. I have no control over my child's brain growth. People tend to believe these things because they watch, social media again. What do you think of this, doctor? Is it a myth or a fact?
It is not a myth and not a fact as well. I think either one. I think it is a constant debate over nature versus nurture. Which is which? Nature is, in this case, means what is intrinsic, and genetic is an intrinsic one that you cannot change. Once you're born with certain genetic material, and that's it. That's the limit you can do. That's what people say. But on the other hand, we, as I mentioned early on, actually, is that I think nurture, the environment, all these modifying factors we can change, and we can make a sort of interest factor better or worse, with or without actually nurture. And a gifted child, for example, if they are not properly guided and stimulated, they will not achieve his or her potential, true potential, right? I think, for example, a good example would be our great Dato' Lee Chong Wei. I think he actually obviously born with a fantastic ability in badminton. But imagine that if we do not allow him to train and develop and teach him the right technique, will he be that all-conquering in his heyday? No, he will not be. He will just be another person that's a little bit better than other children in playing games and playing badminton. Right. So I think that's one thing. So that he is gifted, but we have to actually harness it. And that's what we're seeing in the Olympics now. Actually, that Olympics athletes all those are gifted with a bit of genetic endowment that makes them better. But if we don't train them, they will not actually shine during Olympics. And on the other extreme end, a child with disability for any reason, acquired or born with it, I think if we actually support them, we give them proper rehabilitation, allow them to actually sort of train well and give them supportive environment, they may even outperform a normal child. And that we see in Paralympics. I think they actually perform much better than some of the normal able people. So I think that nature versus nurture is always a difficult issue and difficult things to ask. And if you ask me, I would say that I think it's a combination of both. I think, and then we can see a good example in it. I think if I use an example of children in an urban dwelling, in a good setting and well-resourced family, and a children brought up in a rural area. So they call urban and rural divide. I think in the urban area, I think usually we have all the facility, right? And if the child has problem, we have the intervention that's required. And parents who comes to the urban area and are successful are usually more resourceful and motivated. So in this aspect, the children are growing in the environment that's actually more enriching, more stimulating, and more supportive. Right. On the other hand, the rural area, I think usually have inadequate resources. And the facility to enhance the child's ability is also limited. And parents are usually less resourceful and less motivated. So if the child has some problems, they usually either no intervention or late intervention. So given that, I think that's why we see on the whole, children actually in the rural area tend not to perform as well as the children who grow up in the urban area. It's not that they do not have the genetic material, it's just that they do not have the nurturing environment. Right. So and that's the reason why I think the debate about nature versus nurture continues. But I think that we should be mindful that genetic is not the only thing that limits a child's potential.
Okay, I suppose the key word here would be something like what Ms. Foong mentioned earlier as well. Same thing, is all about encouragement from the adults. Don't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, okay, we're going back to Ms. Foong. So there are a lot of nutrients and vitamins that our bodies need. But what is so special about DHA? Because we keep talking about DHA.
All right. DHA is actually a long-chain fatty acids that our body cannot produce. We have to get it from food. Yeah. So DHA is actually the main type of fat that is making up our brain. Yeah, because more than 50% of our brain is actually made up of fat, and this DHA is one of it. So it's very important to get enough DHA to provide the structural membrane for the brain, and also it influences the neurotransmitters, yeah, how the brain cells actually communicate with each other. So this accumulation of DHA starts from the pregnancy stage right until the child is born up to 2 years old, and also is maintained throughout the childhood and adulthood.
Okay, so I take that you do think that it is all right for DHA supplementation in children.
The first thing is the nutrition from food itself. The actual food source itself is important. That is the basis. Yeah, means we need to encourage the child to eat foods which are rich in DHA. For example, fish, deep sea water fish, you know, like salmon, even our local kembung, tenggiri, all this also has DHA. Yeah, so even eggs these days are fortified with DHA. So, but if the child is unable to meet the DHA requirement from food alone, then supplementation may be needed. Yeah, especially for the child who is adhering to a vegetarian diet. having some form of food allergy, especially to marine food, or being very picky eaters. Let's say they refuse to eat any fish. Yeah. So then these supplements will be useful. So according to the recommended nutrient intake of Malaysia in 2017, the recommendation is for 2 to 4 years old to get about 100 to 150 milligrams of DHA and EPA. 4 to 6 years old would be 150 to 200 milligrams. 7 to 9 years old will need about 200 to 300 milligrams per day. But just take note that higher intakes of DHA doesn't mean improved mental development or physical health for the child.
All right, noted. Okay, next question, Dr. Wong. I once knew a set of parents, they were actually my friends, who had a child who did not speak for a really long time. And the parents were very afraid that there was something, maybe something was not right. And then after that, they found out that he was just lazy. He just didn't want to speak. He was a quiet child. That was it. But it comes back to this, like, how do parents know if their child might have a neurological disorder?
Difficult. I think it's not that easy because parents, unless they are medically literate or medically trained, may not know if the child has neurological problems. But however, I think that they may know something is not quite right. After all, I think parents spend with the child 24/7, right? And if parents have other children already, I think, and all were brought up in an extended family, they are in a better position that they have the experience of other children with them and to see. So there will be hint. For example, I think the hint actually is that this child is behaving different from the other child of mine. Or actually, when I look at my brother, my sister, we don't normally do this, and why my child is doing that? Okay, so that's one thing. I think that one actually is relative because that could be just a normal, like what you say just now, it's just a normal variant. However, I think one of the simplest things that I always tell parents is that if your child can do something previously and lost that ability now, something is not quite right, something is wrong. For example, if a child can talk for, say, until about 2 years old, and suddenly they lost the ability to talk, something is not quite right. If you can walk, there's no reason why you cannot walk now if you can walk previously. So something is not quite right. So I think in that case, that one you should seek help already. Or you can actually have a comparison. I think that means you compare with your other children, you compare with peers' children, your relative children, and see if for the given age, and my child actually so doing as the other child does. And then if it's not, which area is that suggesting a neuro, then that's where you start being sort of a good observation. However, we have to be careful about it because in day and age, I think it's so competitive. I think we heard of the word kiasu, that everybody say my child must be better than other people. I think that's where you do not want to fall into that traps. The other good source of information is from teacher, because teachers don't compare. They are not kiasu, but they have 30, 40, or even 50 in a public school where they see children and they just know that some children are faster than the others, but they're still within the normal range. Then you are reassured. But then they will tell you that I think your child you fall out that range and you have to take note. I think that's what I think that so observation is very important. A bit of information, feedback is important, and then comparisons is important. Put all this together and then actually draw some conclusion and say, is there something not quite right? But if you think you're not sure or you think something is not quite right, then I think don't despair. I think then you should seek professional help as early as possible. Because if someone thinks that's amendable to treatment, early treatment is always better than late treatment. So that's one thing. Second thing actually is that do not depend blindly on the information you are given. Because I think some parents, because of the way they were brought up, obviously have actually preconceived idea and they may give you their opinion that's very biased. So I think don't depend on that, and that may frighten the hell out of you, right? And what you can do actually when somebody or a friend say something that you say, is that true or not? I think I actually would recommend look up in the social media. Internet is great help actually, and Dr. Google, I call them Dr. Google because he give you information sometimes even what I need. But we have to be very careful. We have to be very, very careful about social media. It's a trap because social media is a great source of information, but the information can be biased. I think a good example is vaccination. You have anti-vaxxer give you all sorts of negative and biased information. You might be biased towards that. I think that's one thing. Second thing actually is that even if it's not actually with hidden agenda, internet tend to be actually biased because of the experience of people who put up information in the social media. So when people search the internet, they tend to get a bit of negative sort of information. So I think that's quite important that you have to give a little bit of allowance for that. But what you can do actually is that internet give you some idea, then you get the professional and say, look, I have seen this information in the internet. Is it true or not? Then you go in an open mind and so on. And then so for that, I think then you get a balance or best of both worlds. I think that's how I would say. Use internet, but use it intelligently and get professional help early.
All right. So what is the most important thing that parents, as a parent, can do to support a child's brain development, doctor?
Right. I think we have really said from beginning until now, actually said be around the children. Don't be a helicopter or weekend parents. You parachute down your weekend and then actually that's it. And then by the weekend's over, you go back again somewhere else and the child is left to other carer and so on. I think that's quite important because the children look for actually attachment, look for role model, and look for what I call advice and security. And that's what the parents' role is. So you have to be around that. That's the first thing. So I think don't go away on that. And do not delegate the care to another third party who has no what I call feelings about the children. I think the most important thing that I've seen, I think to be on the lighter side, I once seen a child with a diarrhea. So I asked the dad and the mom, I think how many times the what they call the child had diarrhea. Mom looks blank and father turned around and asked the kakak, berapa kali ceri?
No.
I think, and then when I say, okay, is the child drinking well? The again, mother looks away. Father look at the maid and say, kakak, boleh minum tak? So in this situation, I would recommend the father to marry the maids and not the mother. Right? Because the child will probably get a better environment. I think so. We need to be supportive to the child. I think that's quite important. Right, we have to actually support the child and actually encourage the child to grow, because I think that's actually very important. I think, and that's the one that our culture sometimes is not. Our culture tends to be a little bit punitive, right? But we need to let the child explore, because I think we learn through experience, and we need to encourage child to actually be inquisitive. I think so. I think when you do that, you get a lot of stimulation. The brain starts thinking all the possibility. Right. So I think that we have to have that. I think last but not least, I think the parents actually must lead by example. Do as I do and not do as I say. I think that's quite important. If the parents actually smokes in front of the children and tell the children not to smoke, do you think that they will be convincing? They are not. They are not. They will look at it and say, but you are doing it yourself. And then you lose the argument already. So I think we need to lead by example. So I think that these are all a few things that I think we can be mindful about. I think it's not difficult, but it's not easy as well.
It sounds like what both you, Dr. Wong, and Ms. Foong are saying is mostly instinctual, but at the same time, you also need help by speaking to a professional at the end of the day, right?
That's right.
That's
right.
Yeah. Okay, so Ms. Foong, what are some nutrients that are important to support the developing brain and eyes?
All right. Actually, we have talked quite a lot about brain health. Another nutrient I want to highlight is getting enough iron. Yeah, iron is very important to produce red blood cells, and these blood cells are important for the brain development and also the cognitive performance of the child. So when sources of iron in our food are mainly from animal products like meat, fish, chicken, And another type would be from plant sources, would be the dark green leafy vegetables, even dried fruits and fortified cereal products. Yeah. So make sure the child has adequate nutrient in their diet. Yeah. And to enhance the absorption of nutrient, this iron absorption, you need the vitamin C. Yeah. Rich food like fresh fruits and fresh vegetables are encouraged to be eaten together with iron-rich food. Now, besides from that, another two important antioxidants, which is lutein and zeaxanthin. Now, this is especially very important for eye health because it actually is the main pigment found in the yellow spot of the human retina. Yeah, and it helps to protect the eye and filters all the blue light that is going into the eye. So nowadays, children, especially school-going children, they are in front of the computer and their tablets all the time for learning. So they actually get a lot of exposure to blue light. Yeah. So this lutein and zeaxanthin helps to filter that and to prevent damage in the eye. Besides that, it actually helps to suppress the, besides that, it helps, this lutein and zeaxanthin is very important because too much blue light suppresses the hormone melatonin, okay, and that actually disrupts restfulness and sleep. So imagine if the child doesn't get enough of rest and sleep, they get very irritable, they cannot concentrate in their classes or their activity. So that's also another, may cause some behavioral issues later. So to get enough of this lutein and zeaxanthin, most of the green leafy vegetables are rich sources like spinach, kailan, broccoli, those which are orange and yellow color vegetables like carrots, bell peppers, and even eggs, the egg yolks and salmon are rich sources of these lutein and zeaxanthin. Yeah.
Okay, I used to think that my mother was making it up when she told me to eat a lot of carrots. I don't like carrots. From young.
You can try other sources of, food. Yeah, you got so many other vegetables that also provide.
Yeah.
So you need to have variety. If you don't like one, you choose another sauce.
Well, what you can do is you can hide it in your food. I hide it in my own food, so I can trick myself into eating the carrots. I just grate it finely.
Yeah. You can. Yeah.
You know the child too. So, Dr. Wong, back to you. With the current generation's engagement with digital devices and access screen time, because not only are they learning online now, their downtime is also spent online, because especially in this pandemic time, children can't really go out anymore. So what is your advice for parents and their children in taking better care of their eyes and cognitive function?
I think this is a very challenging question. So I think the digitalization era is here to stay. There's no way about it. We have to accept that I think digital device will be part and parcel of our life. I think, and for children as well. So I think that actually with that statement, we have to make optimize the what I call within that context. See, moderation is the key. I think, and discipline is the important thing. So I think what I normally suggest to parents actually is that build a certain discipline into the usage of digital device. Especially nowadays, I think with the pandemic, I think a lot of children do not go out to exercise, and that makes it more important that you build in breaks and build in some physical activity, because we need physical activity to complement the mental activity as well. So I think the discipline of having that is important. So I think that's one thing, to have frequent breaks. So the reason I choose that, in addition to nutrition and so on, physically, if you look at the screen all the time, especially small screen, you actually are exercising the muscle of the eye, and then you are stressing that. So I think that you need frequent break actually, so that you can relax and look at something further where the muscle can relax and build again. It's almost like saying that if you keep using one set of muscle for a prolonged time, your muscle get tired and you get pain. And same thing with the eyes as well. So I think that's quite important. So I think frequent breaks is one thing. Timing of the break is again a very important thing, and I refer back to what Ms. Foong said already just now. that actually when you use it at night, I think you have to be very careful of when you use it and how you use it. Because I think the light itself, I think, can actually interfere with some function of the brain. So if you actually allow that way late to the what I call night, and you allow children to play games, for example, especially the boy when they play the kind of exciting fighting game and so on, where they're all stimulated, and then the next minute they jump to bed, they don't get restful sleep. So I think that they wake up the next day tired and they cannot learn. I think so. That's one thing. So I think the nighttime actually usage of the digital device can be actually quite important. Where I normally will advise parents that if possible, let's say about half an hour, I think before they go to bed, I think what I call device off, and then make the bedroom device off limit to device. I think the bedroom off limit to device, so that the parents and the children don't quietly sneak and get the phone or whatever to play when parents are not actually seeing. And then worse still, actually they try to hide, they make it all dark, switch on the thing, and can you imagine the blue light? And with the pupils all dilated, can you see how much light goes into the brain? I think that's one thing. So I think that these are all the things that the parents can actually what they call some built-in, the discipline and the sort of timing of it. But quite important thing actually is that the parents must not, and I repeat again, must not use digital device as a substitute for them. A lot of parents, and we can see that actually they use that to engage the child, keep the child busy, and that's it, and then they can go and do their own thing. And we see that a lot. I think in a restaurant you can see that. I think I have a lots of picture whereby I think a whole family, actually everybody is looking at the what they call the mobile phone, and nobody is talking to each other. Right, we are together, but we are not communicating. We are talking, we are not communicating. We are seeing, but we are not actually engaging. So I think this is quite important. So I think that to summarize what I said, I think digitalization is here to stay. We just have to build in a moderate approach, a discipline into it.
Okay, I suppose it's like the time when I was growing up, it was not gadgets, but it was books. So I would sneak into my bedroom and I'll tell my parents, okay, good night, love you. And I'll go under the covers with the torchlight and read my book. But it's the same thing, isn't it? You're still sneaking away to do something in the dark when you're supposed to be going to bed, right?
But reading book give you some knowledge. I think a reading book is always good because it stimulates the thought. Because when you read books and so on, you have to imagine. And that's actually stimulation. Whereas when you have a digital device, it's a passive what I call process most of the time. If you look and see how many children actually engage with the mobile, they don't. They switch on the video and switch on TikTok and just watch the video again and again without thinking what is the actually message from that video, from the YouTube and so on. So it's a very passive thing and not stimulating. Whereas books does stimulate your thought. I think that's a big difference between.
All right. Okay. It has been a very informative and very, very helpful session. And for that, I thank both of you so much for spending time with us today and sharing all these important things that we could not have found on maybe social media. So before we wrap up, are there any take-home message or final advice that will be beneficial for our viewers today? Let's start with Dr. Wong.
I thought it's good to give lady first. Miss Foong, you want to go first?
All right, thank you. Yeah, so the take-home messages would be healthy and balanced nutrition are very important factors for the growth of a child. So, and it should start from the pregnancy stage up to the childhood time, and this has to be sustained. So the parents play an important role model by introducing and sustaining healthy eating habits. And if let's say your child has any challenges in eating, like picky eating or food allergies, or sometimes you just don't know how to plan their meals, do consult a dietitian, and we are here to help you in this process.
All right, thank you, Ms. Foong. Now, Dr. Wong, how about you?
Right, okay, my turn now, right? Yeah. Now, brain development is a very complex things. I think so. I think it's not easy. No easy way out and say 1 + 1 = 2. I think, and I think most importantly, we are not taught to be parents. We observe, we learn along the way. So I think that's why that makes it so complex. I have mentioned throughout this discussion here that actually there are some factors that we cannot change, but there are a lot of factors that we can change. And a lot of factors that we can actually change ourselves as a parents to be a better parents, to provide a good environment. So I think that's what I hope that the audience who listens actually have some idea about how to be a good parents. But it's not easy, but don't worry, all of us actually in the same same shoe. Even as a pediatrician, which I'm supposed to know more about children, when I had my first child, I think it was still a nerve-wracking experience. So I think all of us are in the same shoe. But don't despair. Don't despair. If you find something is not quite right, you think something is not, I mean, maybe, I'm not sure, get help. Seek professional help. I think as early as possible. I think you can find information, but don't depend blindly on the information. Be critical of the information. Right, social media is a great source of information, but remember that it is also a trap that actually may actually sort of mislead us. So I think all these things, I think in the way, I think is how we actually pull all the information together from various sources, from social media, from friends, from your own experience, and then actually come to a conclusion of if there's anything. So brain development actually is complex, but it's not something that's very daunting. So don't worry. I think seek help. We are here to help.
All right. Thank you so much to the both of you. And I just want to wish on behalf of all Malaysians, thank you for being frontliners. And we hope that the both of you continue to stay safe while you're out there helping out the rest of us. And to the parents out there who are watching, if you are considering getting a supplement for your child, please check out Chewies IQ. Now, Chewies is available in Watson's store and their e-commerce platforms. And we will drop more information on the screen. Now, thank you everyone for joining our live show today. Special thank you to Dr. Wong and Ms. Foong. It has been very, very informative. And guys, please share this very, very informative talk with your friends and family. Till then, I'll see you again in the next episode. Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Ms. Foong.
Okay, bye. Thank you.